This is my true story. My only reason to live was my daughter, my little girl who I thought would always love me. But years later, she looked at me with disgust and said, "You're disgusting, Dad. You embarrass me." I stood there, silent, holding back tears that had waited years to fall. I had worked all my life for her, fed her, clothed her, gave her everything I could. But that day, something inside me broke. I didn't argue. I just walked away. But when she opened my $175 estate will after I was gone, her world collapsed. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And please subscribe so that my stories can reach more people. I never thought I would hear those words from the same mouth that once called me Daddy with love. "You're disgusting," she said, her voice sharp, cold, and full of shame. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the world stopped around me. My hands trembled and I looked at her face. The same face I once kissed goodnight. The same eyes that used to look up to me like I was the strongest man in the world. Now those eyes looked at me like I was dirt. She didn't even hesitate when she said it. There was no guilt in her voice, no regret, just pride. It wasn't anger that I felt. It was something worse. Disbelief. I raised her alone after her mother passed. I worked 2 jobs, janitor in the mornings, cleaner at night. My hands cracked from the cold, my back bent from lifting things no one else wanted to touch. I never complained. Every dollar I earned I saved for her. Her school, her food, her clothes. Everything came from my sacrifice. When she was little, I used to make her breakfast before school and she'd hug me saying, "You're the best dad in the world." I still remember those mornings like they happened yesterday. That tiny kitchen, the smell of cheap coffee, her laughter. It kept me alive after her mother was gone. I thought that bond would never break. I was wrong. As she grew older, she changed. It started small, like a slow poison. She stopped wanting me to pick her up from school because my clothes smelled like cleaning chemicals. She said her friends made fun of her. I understood, or at least I told myself I did. Teenagers care about appearances. I thought she'd grow out of it, but she didn't. The older she got, the more distance she put between us. Every year, I became smaller in her life. I watched her graduate, start a job, move to the city, and slowly erase me from her world. At first, I was proud. She was doing well, working in an office, earning more than I ever could. I didn't want to burden her, so I never asked for anything. I just called sometimes, left messages, told her I loved her. Sometimes she called back. Most times she didn't. I thought maybe she was busy. I made excuses for her silence. Parents do that. We protect our children, even from the truth. Then one day, she visited after years of staying away. I had been waiting for that day for so long. I cleaned the house, cooked her favorite meal, and wore my best shirt. When she arrived, I saw her standing at the door in fancy clothes, her perfume strong, her face made up perfectly. She looked successful, happy, but her eyes, they were different, cold, detached. She looked around the house like she was disgusted to be there. The cracks in the wall, the old furniture, the smell of age, things I didn't even notice anymore, all seemed to bother her. When she spoke, her tone was sharp. She said the house smelled awful, that I looked unwell, that I should take better care of myself. I laughed a little, trying to lighten the mood, but she didn't laugh back. Then, out of nowhere, she said it. "You're disgusting." Just like that, like spitting out something bitter. She looked right at me, her face full of irritation, not love. I froze. I wanted to ask her why. What had I done to deserve that? But I didn't ask. My mouth opened, but no words came out. She grabbed her purse, said she had to go, and walked away. After she left, I sat in that same chair for hours. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stared at the wall. My chest felt heavy, like there was a stone inside it. My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from heartbreak. I thought about every sacrifice I made. The nights I went hungry so she could eat. The times I walked in the rain so she could have bus fare. The hours I worked when my body was begging me to stop. And for what? To be told I was disgusting. That night, I went through old photos. Her first day at school. her wedding day, the smile I had given everything to protect. I realized something. Love doesn't always return home. Sometimes, it just dies quietly in the heart of the one who gave it. But even then, I couldn't hate her. I didn't know how. I was her father. And even when she broke me, a part of me still hoped she'd remember who I was, the man who raised her from nothing. After that day, something inside me changed forever. I stopped expecting her calls. I stopped checking my phone every evening, hoping to see her name on the screen. I learned to live with silence, the kind that eats away at you slowly, one lonely day at a time. I'd sit by the window every morning, watching people pass by, holding on to the small hope that maybe she'd come visit, but she never did. Weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. My daughter was alive somewhere, living her perfect life, but in my world, she was gone. When she was young, she used to call me every night, no matter what, even if it was just to tell me about her day. I lived for those calls. They made my tired bones feel lighter, my heart warm. But once she started earning money, everything shifted. It began with excuses. "I'm busy, Dad. I'll call you later. Work is crazy." I understood at first. I told myself she had a life to live. But later, her words stopped sounding like excuses and started sounding like walls. I'd call and hear the hesitation in her voice, the annoyance. The distance between us wasn't miles anymore. It was pride. She got promoted, bought a big apartment in the city, and started posting pictures of her new life online. Fancy restaurants, expensive clothes, new friends. I saw all of it, not because she told me, but because the world did. Everyone seemed to know about her success except me, the man who had worked his hands raw to make sure she had shoes on her feet. I never felt jealous, not once. I was proud, but I was also invisible. I wasn't a father anymore. I was a shadow behind her achievements, the past she wanted to forget. I remember once I sent her a small package, just an old photo of her and her mother, wrapped in brown paper. I thought it might remind her of home. She didn't reply. Instead, a week later, I got a text message. "Don't send me things, Dad. It's weird." That one sentence cut deeper than any insult could. Weird. That's what I had become to her. Not a father, not family, but something embarrassing, something to be hidden away. Every time I saw her picture on social media, smiling beside people who barely knew her story, I'd think about all the nights I sat awake by her hospital bed when she was little, worried she wouldn't wake up. I'd think about how I used to walk to work before sunrise, just to pay her school fees on time. I gave her everything, and in return, she erased me. Sometimes I wondered if it was my fault. Maybe I made her ashamed. Maybe my clothes, my small house, my old car. Maybe they were too ugly for her new world. I tried not to blame her. But the truth is, her shame burned through me like acid. I stopped going out much. I stopped talking to neighbors because I was afraid they'd ask about her. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to people that your only child is ashamed of you? I started noticing small things in her behavior, even before that awful day she called me disgusting. The way she avoided hugging me in public. The way she'd changed the topic when people asked about her parents. I once overheard her on the phone, telling someone her father had passed away years ago. I froze when I heard it. I didn't confront her. I just sat in the next room, my chest tight, feeling like I had died without actually dying. That was the day I truly realized I had lost my daughter long before she said those words to my face. I think success made her forget where she came from. She traded love for luxury, kindness for image, and her heart for pride. She built a new world for herself, one where there was no space for me. The more money she earned, the smaller I became in her memory. She didn't want the reminder of who she used to be, a little girl from a small house, raised by a man who worked until his hands bled. But I never stopped loving her. Even as she drifted away, even as her words turned cold, I prayed for her every night. I prayed that she'd find peace, that she'd find gratitude, that she'd one day remember who she truly was, because deep down I knew, no matter how far she ran, no matter how many titles she earned, she couldn't run from blood. A father's love doesn't vanish, even when it's rejected. It just sits quietly in the corner, waiting for the child to come home. And though she didn't know it yet, life had a strange way of making people face what they've buried. My daughter was about to learn that lesson in a way she'd never forget. It was a cold afternoon when I decided to visit her. I hadn't seen her in nearly 2 years. My health wasn't good, and something in me told me I should see her one more time, not to ask for anything, not to beg for love, but just to see her face. I put on my best shirt, the one my wife bought me decades ago. It was old, but I ironed it carefully. I combed my hair, polished my shoes, and took the bus to her neighborhood. It was a long ride, almost 2 hours, but I didn't mind. The thought of seeing my daughter made it worth it. I carried a small bag with me, just some fruit and a photo of her mother that I thought she might want to keep. I remember holding that bag tightly the whole way there, my heart pounding like I was about to see a stranger I needed to impress. Her house stood tall and modern. Big gates, expensive cars parked outside, shining windows. It didn't feel like the place I once imagined her in. It felt cold, polished, perfect, like her life had become. I walked to the gate and rang the bell. A few minutes later, she came out. At first, she didn't even recognize me. Her eyes squinted like she was trying to place my face. Then when she did, her expression changed immediately. Not joy, not surprise, just annoyance. I smiled, tried to say hello, but her face stayed stiff. She didn't open the gate fully. She stood halfway, arms crossed. "Why are you here?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, tired, as if my presence was an inconvenience. I told her I just wanted to see her, to give her something small, to check on her. She sighed loudly, looked around nervously as if someone might see her. Then she said words that broke whatever was left of my pride. "I don't want my friends to see you. You look like a beggar." For a second, I thought I misheard her. But then she looked at my shoes, my shirt, my hands, and her disgust was real. My throat went dry. I tried to tell her I wasn't here for money, that I just missed her. But she didn't care. She told me she was busy, that she didn't have time for emotional visits. Then she did something I'll never forget. She pulled out her phone, looked at her watch, and said she had to leave for lunch with her friends. She opened her purse, took out a few bills, maybe $20, and said, "Here, take this for the bus." I didn't take it. I just shook my head and stepped back. I stood there watching her get into her car, talking on her phone, laughing, while I stood on the sidewalk with the small bag still in my hands. The guard looked at me with pity. The world around me blurred. I wasn't angry. I was hollow. I had never felt so unwanted in my life. Not even when I buried my wife. Because that day, at least, I had my daughter holding my hand. Now, I had nothing. As the car drove away, I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. The photo of her mother slipped out of the bag and landed on the pavement. I bent slowly to pick it up, and as I did, I whispered, "She's gone, love. Our little girl is gone." My voice cracked. People walked past me, not knowing, not caring. I walked away slowly, my legs weak, my chest tight. The world felt heavier than ever before. On the way home, I didn't cry. I didn't even think. I just stared out the window, watching strangers live their lives while mine felt like it had ended quietly years ago. When I got home, I placed the photo of her mother back on the table and sat in silence. The house felt colder that night. I realized that I had been holding on to a memory, not a daughter, the girl I raised, the one who used to hug me after school, the one who cried when I got sick. She was gone. The woman she became looked like her, but didn't have her heart. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat there in the dark, staring at the wall, thinking about all the moments that led to this. Every sacrifice, every long night, every dream I had for her. And now, all I could think was how my love had become something to be ashamed of in her eyes. Poverty hurts, but rejection from your own child hurts deeper. It's a kind of pain no medicine can touch. I made a quiet promise to myself that night. I would never go back to her house again. Not to beg, not to explain, not to remind her who I was, because she already knew. She just didn't care. But I wasn't done yet. I still had one thing left. My will, my final words. And this time, I would make sure she remembered me. Not through tears, not through guilt, but through truth. That night, after coming back from her house, I sat in complete silence. No television, no lights, just the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Every second felt louder than the last, each one pressing against my chest like a reminder that time was moving and I was running out of it. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because the tears were gone. I had spent too many years hoping, forgiving, waiting, and now there was nothing left inside me to give. I just sat there, hands on my knees, staring at the same old floor I had mopped 1,000 times. That little house had seen every version of me. The young father full of dreams, the broken widower, the man who refused to give up. And now it was seeing the end of a father's heart. I made myself a cup of tea, though it didn't taste like anything. My stomach was empty, but my mind was full of memories I didn't ask for her first steps. Her laughter when she lost her first tooth. The night she ran a fever, and I stayed awake holding her in my arms, whispering prayers. The mornings I packed her lunch with the last few coins I had. Every moment played in my head like an old film I couldn't stop watching. I thought love was enough to make a child stay kind. I thought sacrifice meant something. I thought I had raised her right, but life has a cruel way of proving you wrong. At some point, I stood up and walked to my drawer, the one where I kept all my important papers, bills, insurance forms, letters from old jobs, everything. I pulled out the brown envelope that held my will. It had been sitting there for years, untouched, written when I still believed my daughter loved me. Back then, I had written her name proudly. To my beloved daughter, the one who made every struggle worth it. I stared at those words for a long time. They didn't feel true anymore. My hand began to shake as I opened the envelope and unfolded the paper. My old eyes could barely read it, but I remembered every word I had written, all the little things I had hoped would help her after I was gone. The savings, the insurance, the small piece of land I owned. All meant for her, all written with love. But love, I realized, shouldn't be one-sided. Love should be given where it's valued, where it's seen. I took out a pen and stared at the page for a long time. Then I began to rewrite it. Slowly, carefully, line by line. I changed everything. I removed her name from every section that promised her comfort. I replaced it with something else. Something that would make her finally see what her actions had done. My hand moved steady, my mind clear. It wasn't anger driving me. It was truth. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was simply tired of being invisible. When I finished, I sealed the new will inside a fresh envelope and wrote a note on top. For my daughter, to remind her what love costs when you forget who gave it. Then I placed it back inside the drawer. I sat there for a while after that, staring at it, thinking about how life had turned out. I never imagined my final act as a father would be writing a message that my daughter might only understand when it was too late. But maybe that's how lessons work. They arrive after everything else is gone. I looked around the room one last time that night. The photo of my wife on the wall, the clock ticking, the empty chair across from me. I felt old, not just in body, but in spirit. Tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. I whispered softly, I did my best. It wasn't for anyone to hear. It was just for me. Because deep down, I knew I had nothing left to prove I had loved. I had given. And even though my daughter had turned away, I would leave the world knowing I had done my part. When I finally went to bed, I slept better than I had in years. Maybe because, for the first time, I wasn't holding on anymore. I had let go of the pain, of the disappointment, of the hope that she would ever say, sorry. The will sitting in that drawer was more than paper. It was my voice, the one she ignored when I was alive, but the one she'd have no choice but to hear after I was gone. It happened quietly, the way most endings do. I didn't die in pain or fear. I simply went to sleep one night and didn't wake up. The neighbors said they found me sitting on my chair by the window, the same place I used to sit and wait for her visits that never came. They said I looked peaceful. Maybe I was. Maybe after all those years of heartbreak, my soul had finally found rest. I had no riches, no fame, no luxury to my name. But I had one thing left. My final word. My will. The one thing she couldn't ignore. The one truth she couldn't twist. A week later, my lawyer contacted her. She came to his office, not out of love, but out of curiosity, maybe even greed. She arrived in a luxury car, dressed perfectly as always, walking with that same confidence that used to make me proud, but now only reminded me of distance. People in the office noticed her immediately. Her perfume, her designer bag, the way she spoke like the world owed her something. She didn't look sad. She didn't look like a daughter who'd just lost her father. She looked like someone expecting an inheritance, maybe even a reward for being who she was. The lawyer, an old friend of mine, said she barely greeted him. She just sat down and said, "Let's get this over with." He opened the folder, adjusted his glasses, and began reading. The room fell silent. Every word I had written, every line I had changed that night, now echoed through that room. She sat there, confident, maybe even smiling, expecting to hear about savings, land, something valuable. But instead, she heard this. I, Richard Lane, leave behind my entire estate valued at $175. The lawyer said she blinked, confused at first, like she thought it was a mistake. She gave a small laugh, the same laugh she used when she thought someone beneath her had said something foolish. But the lawyer kept reading. There was no mistake. That was the exact amount left in my account. $175. That was my entire estate. Years of hard work, decades of struggle, and all that remained in the world with my name on it was that small amount. I had nothing else to give her. No wealth, no property, just that money. And a lesson written in ink she couldn't escape. He continued reading the next line. And I also leave the keys to the storage unit attached. Inside, you will find the proof of what love truly means. She frowned. Maybe she thought there was something hidden, something valuable waiting for her. Maybe she thought it was gold, jewelry, or property deeds. The greed in her eyes must have returned. She probably stood up the moment the lawyer finished, snatched the envelope, and rushed out, not caring to ask another question, because that's who she had become, someone who ran after value, not meaning. Later that day, she drove to the address written on the envelope, a small storage unit on the outskirts of town, the same one I used to visit once a year to clean and leave flowers. The air inside was cold and dusty. The light flickered when she entered. She found the small box sitting in the middle of the room, wrapped neatly with her name on it. That was all. Just one small box. She opened it and found what she wasn't expecting. Not money, not gold, not property. Just a few things from her past. Inside the box were her childhood drawings, the ones I had saved from when she was 5. Crayon sketches of our family, our house, her mother smiling. There was also her mother's old wedding ring, the one she had begged to play with as a child. And at the very bottom, a small envelope with a single folded paper. A bank receipt. The numbers on it didn't look like much, just a deposit made 20 years ago for $175. But it wasn't the amount that mattered. It was what it represented. The beginning of something I had once built for her, something I had once believed would secure her future. She didn't know it yet, but that small deposit had grown into something far greater. What came next would crush her completely. The lawyer told me later that when she sat there hearing my will, her confidence began to crack little by little. She had walked into that office expecting power, control, maybe even pity. She thought she would sign a few papers, collect her inheritance, and walk out as if my life had been another transaction. But as he read my words, her expression started to change. At first, she smirked, like someone hearing a bad joke. Then her smile faded. Then came confusion. And by the time the reading ended, there was only silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. When the lawyer read the line, I leave behind my entire estate valued at $175. She actually laughed. Loudly, she thought it was a trick. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms like she was waiting for the real part. The part where he'd mention land deeds or secret accounts or something that would justify her time. But that part never came. Instead, he continued, "And I also leave the keys to the storage unit attached. Inside, you will find the proof of what love truly means." That line made her blink. The words confused her. Maybe she thought I had hidden money there, or that I'd left her something sentimental, a treasure that could still benefit her somehow. She didn't ask questions. She simply grabbed the envelope with the key inside and stormed out of the lawyer's office. She didn't say, "Thank you." She didn't even sign the final page properly. She just wanted to get to that storage unit. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she left, the same sound she used to make when walking away from me mid-sentence. The lawyer said he sat there for a few moments after she left, staring at the empty chair. He told me later, "Richard, I've read hundreds of wills in my life, but none like yours. It wasn't about revenge, it was truth wrapped in paper." That meant something to me, even after I was gone. Because that's what I wanted. Not revenge, just truth. She drove straight to the storage facility, her mind racing. Maybe she imagined boxes of jewelry, hidden savings, or something valuable. That's what greed does. It feeds hope until reality crushes it. She arrived, showed the letter, and the worker handed her the key. The metal door creaked as it lifted. Inside was only one small box sitting in the center of the floor. She frowned, probably annoyed. She walked over, expecting more, expecting something that looked like wealth. But the box was plain, old, dusty. She bent down, opened it, and found the things I'd left behind. Her childhood drawings, her mother's ring, the photo of our family from the days when love was enough. At first, she probably thought it was sentimental nonsense, something she could throw away later. But then she saw the envelope, a small, folded piece of paper inside with a bank logo, a receipt. She opened it and saw the number. $175, the same amount mentioned in the will. She rolled her eyes, thinking it was another joke, but the note written underneath changed everything. It said, 20 years ago, I invested this money for you. I told myself that no matter how small it would grow with love. The same way I raised you, it did grow. But love didn't. For the first time in years, she didn't move. She just stood there, holding that paper, reading it again and again. Maybe she felt her throat tighten. Maybe she wanted to scream. Because under that note was another line, the one that would make her world collapse completely. It said, "The account connected to this receipt is no longer yours. It now belongs to the orphanage, in the name of forgotten fathers." In that single moment, she lost everything. The money, the inheritance, and the illusion that she had won. That storage unit didn't just hold memories, it held the truth. Every dollar that could have made her life easier now lived under the name of the people who would never call anyone disgusting. She had insulted the hands that raised her, and now those same hands had built something for others who would never do the same. When she stepped out of that storage unit, her heels no longer clicked. Her steps were slow, heavy, broken. For the first time in her adult life, she felt what I had felt for years. The emptiness of being unseen, unwanted, unvalued. She had lost her father long before my death. But that day, she finally realized what that loss truly meant. When she opened that small, worn box, she expected gold or bonds, something that could buy her comfort or status. Instead, what she found were the quiet pieces of a life she had thrown away. The first thing she pulled out was a stack of papers held together by an old ribbon, her childhood drawings. The colors were faded, but the shapes were still clear. In one, she had drawn herself holding my hand, a big smile on her face, and next to us, her mother, with hearts floating above our heads. At the bottom of the page, in her shaky handwriting, it said, "Me, Mommy, and Daddy. Together, forever." She stared at those papers for a long time. Maybe for the first time in years, she remembered what love used to look like. Then she found the small velvet pouch inside was her mother's ring. Simple, worn, the gold slightly scratched from years of work. It wasn't worth much, maybe a few $100s at best. But to me, it had been priceless. That ring had been her mother's promise to always stand by her family. It was a symbol of love that didn't need wealth to survive. But my daughter had long forgotten what symbols like that meant. Underneath the ring was a letter, folded, yellowed, my handwriting shaky but clear. It began simply, "If you're reading this, it means my time has ended. Don't be sad. I lived a full life, one that was built around loving you." She read every word. My lawyer said she stayed there for almost an hour, her head down, not moving. Maybe she was crying quietly. Maybe she wasn't. The letter continued. "You may think I left you nothing, but I left you everything you ever needed to understand what love really is." Then came the part that turned her heart inside out. The part that explained everything about that $175. I had written, "When you were a little girl, I opened a small account for you. I put $175 in it, all I had left at the time. It was meant to grow as you did, to be there when you needed it most. 20 years later, that small amount turned into something much bigger. Not because of the money, but because of patience, time, and love, the same things I tried to give you." The note continued, "But love without gratitude dies, and money without meaning destroys. So before I left this world, I made one final decision. I took what had grown from that $175, every cent, every ounce of value, and I gave it to those who never had a father to love them, those who would never have someone to believe in them the way I once believed in you." The lawyer told me she stopped reading at that line. She just sat there, staring at the paper, her hands shaking. She probably thought it was some kind of cruel joke. But at the bottom of the letter, I had attached a copy of the bank transaction, the proof. Every cent, all $2.5 million, transferred to the local orphanage I had visited every Christmas, the one where the children used to call me Grandpa. And below that, I had written one final message. "You called me disgusting once. Maybe you were right. I was foolish enough to love without expecting anything in return. But I pray one day you'll see that love is not measured in money, but in memory. And I left you every memory you ever needed." When she reached the end, there was no gold, no wealth, no property deed. Just truth. Plain, raw, and undeniable. Everything she had turned away from, everything she had mocked, everything she had thrown out of her heart was now standing right in front of her, staring back from the words of a dead man. She realized then that her arrogance had cost her more than money. She had lost her inheritance, yes, but more than that, she had lost the right to say she had been loved purely. That was the real fortune she had thrown away. The storage unit didn't just hold things, it held everything she had taken for granted. As she stood there surrounded by boxes of old memories and broken pride, the truth finally sank in. The father she had called disgusting had died still loving her, and that was the one inheritance she could never spend, never sell, never buy back. She stood there in that cold storage unit, surrounded by silence and ghosts. For a long time, she didn't move. The only sound was her breathing, uneven, shaky, breaking with every second. The paper with my handwriting trembled in her hands. The words, "forgotten fathers," stared back at her like a mirror showing everything she didn't want to see. Her lips quivered, and for the first time in her adult life, she had no words, no pride, no excuses. The air felt heavy. The world, which once revolved around her success, suddenly felt small, suffocating. The truth hit her all at once. She hadn't just lost money. She had lost the man who loved her unconditionally. The father who worked his hands raw to raise her. The father she called disgusting. The man she left behind for wealth and image. And now that same man had left her a final lesson written in ink. Love without respect turns into regret. She dropped to her knees, the paper slipping from her hands. The box beside her spilled its contents. The drawings, the photos, the old ring, scattered across the cold floor like pieces of a past she could never glue back together. The receipt fluttered next to her. $175, such a small amount, but it was everything I had when I started her future. That little deposit had turned into millions, and she had lost it not because of chance, but because of choice. Because she chose greed over gratitude. Because she chose shame over love. Because she forgot that the hands she rejected were the same hands that built her life. She picked up her mother's ring, clutching it so tightly it almost cut into her palm. For years, she had hidden everything connected to her parents, the photos, the memories, the stories. She thought she had outgrown them. Now she realized that those were the only things that had ever mattered. She pressed the ring to her chest and cried. Not soft tears, but heavy sobs that came from somewhere deep, a place she had buried long ago. When the lawyer later told me what happened, he said the workers found her sitting there for hours, unable to move. Her eyes were swollen, her makeup ruined, her pride gone. She kept whispering, "Why?" over and over again. But the answer was already written in every word of my letter. Because respect isn't owed, it's earned, and she had spent her life forgetting that. She drove home that night in silence. The roads were empty, but her mind was full of noise. Every memory she had pushed away came flooding back. The sound of my laughter, the smell of my old coffee, the warmth of my voice calling her name when she was little. The nights I stayed awake when she was sick, the mornings I walked her to school in the rain. Every forgotten moment came back like punishment. By the time she reached home, she wasn't the same person anymore. She sat in her big, expensive living room, the one filled with things that looked perfect but felt cold. She looked around and saw everything I had never cared about: money, furniture, luxury, and realized none of it could fill the hole she had dug herself. All the wealth in the world couldn't buy back the one thing she lost: love. She looked at her phone, maybe thinking of calling someone, maybe thinking of apologizing to a voice that would never answer again, but I was gone, and all she had left was the echo of the words she once said to me. "You're disgusting." The next morning she went back to the lawyer's office. Her eyes were red. Her voice was quiet. She asked him if there was any way to reverse the transfer, any way to get the money back from the orphanage. He told her no. The funds were sealed legally, permanently. The children had already begun receiving aid from it. I had made sure of it. The orphanage would build new rooms, buy new beds, new clothes, new books, all from the money that once belonged to my daughter, and the plaque outside would read, "In memory of Richard Lane, a father never forgotten." That was when she truly broke. The lawyer said she started crying uncontrollably, begging for forgiveness, not from the law, but from the memory of me. But forgiveness doesn't erase the truth. She had called me disgusting. She had treated me like a burden. And now, the world saw her for what she had become. Not rich, not powerful, but empty. Her life didn't collapse because of money. It collapsed because she finally saw herself through my eyes. And she couldn't stand what she saw. When the money was gone, so was the mask she'd worn for years. The daughter who once stood tall, proud, untouchable, was suddenly small again, not in body, but in spirit. For the first time in her life, she couldn't buy her way out of pain. The world she built with pride began to crumble from the inside. Friends stopped visiting, calls went unanswered. The same people who praised her success now whispered about her downfall. That's how life works. When money speaks, everyone listens. When truth speaks, everyone disappears. In the days that followed, she stopped going to work. She stayed home most of the time, curtains drawn, food untouched. The same luxury that once made her feel powerful now made her feel trapped. Every corner of that big house reminded her of what she had lost. She would open her closet full of expensive clothes and feel nothing. She'd look at her reflection in the mirror and not recognize the woman staring back, because the truth had stripped her of everything fake. What was left was a daughter haunted by the father she had forgotten. She started visiting the orphanage, quietly, without telling anyone. At first, it was out of guilt. She wanted to see where her inheritance had gone. Maybe part of her hoped there'd been some mistake. But the moment she stepped inside, she froze. The walls were painted fresh. The air smelled of new books, clean sheets, and warm food. Dozens of children laughed and played around her. They looked happy, safe. She saw a group of them sitting at a new table, eating together, smiling. The director came to greet her and told her that the donation had changed everything. He showed her the plaque on the wall. It said, "In memory of Richard Lane, a father never forgotten." She stood there for a long time, staring at my name carved in gold. Her eyes filled with tears. The director didn't know who she was. To him, she was just another visitor. But to her, every letter on that plaque was a reminder that she had called her own father disgusting. And now, strangers honored me more than she ever had. The director told her about how the donation had built a new dormitory for the children, how it provided food, books, and medical care. He said the kids often asked about the man behind the name. Who was Richard Lane? She smiled weakly and said, "He was my father." For the first time, those words didn't come out with pride or shame, just truth. He offered to show her around, but she couldn't move. She just stood there, tears falling quietly as she whispered to herself, "He gave me everything, and I gave him nothing." That day, she stayed for hours. She watched the children play. She helped serve them food. One little boy came up to her and said, "Thank you, miss. Grandpa Richard gave us this home." She broke down completely. She knelt and hugged him, sobbing uncontrollably, whispering apologies that no one could understand. That moment changed her. It didn't erase what she had done, but it woke her up. After that, she started visiting every week. She brought books, toys, and clothes, not to fill the hole in her image, but to fill the emptiness in her soul. She began volunteering, using her time instead of her money. For the first time in years, she found something real. The children didn't care about her clothes or her past. They just saw kindness. And that kindness started healing her in ways wealth never could. She sold her luxury apartment and moved into a smaller home. She stopped buying things she didn't need. She started writing letters to me. She'd take them to the orphanage, read them aloud by the plaque with my name, and leave them there. Every letter began the same way. "Dad, I'm sorry." Regret became her teacher. She learned that respect can't be demanded, only earned. That money can fill your hands, but never your heart. And that a parent's love, once taken for granted, becomes the heaviest burden to carry when they're gone. In the end, she didn't just lose her inheritance. She gained her reflection back. She learned that what defines a person isn't how much they have, but how much they give. I never wanted revenge. I only wanted her to see. And she did. But by the time she understood, I was already gone. She visits my grave now. Every year, on my birthday, she leaves fresh flowers and whispers, "You were never disgusting, Dad. I was blind." She stands there for hours, crying softly as the wind carries her words away. And maybe, just maybe, she finally understands that some lessons don't come in comfort. They come in collapse. It's strange what time does. It takes away your body, your voice, your strength, but it gives you truth. Now, as I rest beneath the earth I once walked, I can see everything clearly. The life I lived wasn't perfect. It was filled with mistakes, losses, and pain. But every choice I made came from love. I gave everything I had to my daughter, not just money, not just effort, but my soul. I thought love would be enough to protect her from the cruelty of the world. I never imagined she would become the one who broke me the most. But I've come to understand something. Love, even when unreturned, still leaves behind something pure. They say parents should never outlive the love of their children. I did. And it hurt more than anything I've ever known. But I didn't let that pain die with me. I turned it into something that could live, something that could feed, shelter, and comfort others. I couldn't fix my daughter's heart, but I could make sure no other child would feel the kind of abandonment I did. That's why I gave it all away. The inheritance, the money, the fortune that grew quietly in a bank account I opened with hope and faith. I gave it to the ones who still believed in love without asking for it back. Because that's what being a father means. You keep giving, even when you're gone. Now my name lives on a wall in a building full of laughter. They call me Grandpa Richard. Children who never knew me still speak my name with gratitude. They eat because of the money I saved. They sleep safely because of the shelter I built. They smile because of the love I left behind. That's what real wealth looks like. Not numbers in a bank, not cars or jewelry, but impact, something that outlives you, something that carries your kindness forward. As for my daughter, I don't hate her. I never did. I forgave her long before she realized she needed forgiveness. I forgave her when she called me disgusting. I forgave her when she closed her door in my face. I forgave her when she made me feel small, invisible, and unwanted. Because forgiveness isn't for the one who hurts you. It's for your own soul. Hate would have chained me to her cruelty. Forgiveness set me free. And in the end, it's what saved her too. Because even though my body is gone, my forgiveness lives on. In every letter she writes, in every tear she sheds, in every visit she makes to the orphanage that now carries my name. I know she stands there sometimes, staring at the plaque, running her fingers over the letters. Maybe she thinks about the time she pushed me away. Maybe she remembers the sound of my voice. Maybe she finally understands that I never wanted her money, her time, or her success. I just wanted her respect. That's all any parent wants. To be seen. To be loved. To not be treated like a burden. That's the real inheritance. Not what you leave in a bank, but what you leave in a heart. If I could speak to her one last time, I would tell her this. I never wanted to hurt you, only to teach you. I didn't take anything from you. I gave it back to the world, the same world that gave me you. Maybe she would cry, maybe she wouldn't. But I know one thing. She finally sees the truth. And the truth is simple. She called me disgusting because she only saw what I lacked. But now she understands what I had: dignity, love, and peace. The things no amount of wealth can buy. The things she had to lose everything to learn. So, as I rest now, I am not bitter. I am free. My story isn't one of revenge. It's one of balance. Life has a way of giving people exactly what they give out. She gave shame, and she received truth. She gave cruelty, and she found regret. But she also found her heart again, and that to me is enough. My final thought is this. She called me disgusting, but in the end, she found beauty in the truth I left behind. She lost her inheritance, but she gained her soul. And that's a trade any father would make, even in death.